Started. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our Distinguished Alumni panel. I'm so glad each of you are able to be here this afternoon with us and hope each of you will find something insightful or beneficial to take away from our panel today, no matter what phase of life you may be in. As an official note, just as I mentioned, we will be recording today, and we are also live streaming on Facebook, just so that anyone at a later date, if they could not make it today, has that recording to utilize. My name is Carrie Lovelace, and I recently started as the Director of Alumni Engagement and Stewardship. Along with me today, I also have Jim Phillips, and he serves as the Director of Growth and Expansion. Jim is going to be helping with some of this technology back end of our Zoom webinar today. As we conclude our event and finish out our panel, we will open up the floor for questions for our panelists. So as a housekeeping point, there are 2 points of communication for our attendees today. Our attendees, you can utilize that chat area. Just say hey, tell us where you're calling in from. The Q&A section that you will see, we ask that you utilize that Q&A portion of the platform to ask your questions to the panelists. In addition, if you have a specific question for a panelist, just make sure you put what panelist you're targeting that question to, so we can make sure that it gets asked to that specific individual. So Jim is going to be overseeing that Q&A. If you have a specific question or issue, just directly message him. You can do that in the chat area by selecting his name. So before we get started with introductions, we are going to run this quick poll, and we will just see who's engaging with us today, who's logged in. And Jim, I'm going to switch this over so you can run that poll. So if you guys can just plug this in, let us know who you are, what general education represents you, what area of the country are you tuning in from. If you guys are with a group of brothers, so if we've got multiple people together joining in with us today, drop that in the chat just so that we know how many of you guys are joining in and we have an accurate representation of our attendees. Awesome. Great. We're going to go ahead and close this out. The Midwest is winning with 43% of attendance. I don't think that's a surprise. All right. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to get started with the introductions of our panelists, and then we'll move into our conversation related, some based questions that we have. So our first panelist today is Matthew Ostanek, Iowa State 97. Matthew Ostanek graduated from Iowa State University with his Bachelor of Architecture in 2001. He also holds a Master of Business Administration from Iowa State University, which he received in 2009. Mr. Ostanek founded Given in 2019. Given is a mobile and web platform that connects people and organizations in need with people and businesses who are willing to give. Mr. Ostanek is also the founder of Sherritt Venture Group, which was founded in 2014. This organization helps architecture and design firms become better businesses by investing in small to mid-sized firms using a unique shared risk model that provides financial management, leadership development, marketing and business development, ownership transition services, recruitment, and other business support for the firms they partner with. Additionally, Mr. Ostanek is the founder of Firm IQ, a financial health dashboard for architects, engineers, and other design firms. He also is the founder of IA Quant, a publisher of an automated algorithmic stock trading application used for data analytics and statistics to solve real-world business problems and financial questions. Mr. Ostanek also held the role of founder and CEO of FunnelWise from 2014 to 2018. FunnelWise provided analytic software to help marketing and sales teams leverage insights from their data to close more deals and measure marketing return on investment. Mr. Ostanek is a licensed architect with the Iowa Architectural Examining Board. Mr. Ostanek is also involved in volunteer support with the American Institute of Architects, Iowa chapter, having served previously with the board of directors and currently serving as the president. He also serves as a chair on the Plan and Zoning Commission with the City of Dallas Center. Matthew, thank you again for being with us today. Our next panelist is Zero Gray, Purdue, 86. Zero Gray graduated from Purdue University with a Bachelor of Science in Agricultural Economics in 1990. From its founding in 2007 to present, Mr. Gray has held the position of Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at Taze River Investments, LLC. His responsibilities include the oversight, development, and collaboration of staff professionals tasked with the acquisition, engagement, strategy, management, and performance of the Taze River's portfolio of businesses and assets. Taze River is a U.S. holding company with a strategic focus on production-based and vertically integrated agricultural businesses. Prior to joining Taze, Mr. Gray was professionally involved in the hybrid seed industry for over 17 years as a principal of Gray's Seed Incorporated. From 2007 to present, Mr. Gray has and continues to serve on multiple boards related to the private holding of Taze River. 3 current non-executive board positions collectively provide oversight for greater than $1 billion in annual sales and operations across the Americas and Europe. From 2001 to 2005, Mr. Gray served on the board of directors for the Indiana Seed Trade Association. ISTA represents the educational and legislative concerns of the seed trade in one of the largest seed producing states in the United States. During his term on the board, Mr. Gray served as vice president and president. From 1999 to 2004, Mr. Gray served on the board of directors for the Indiana Crop Improvement Association. ICIA is a world leader in the development of quality assurance and genetic testing programs for seed, grain, and food. During his term on the board, Mr. Gray served as vice president and president. He continued to serve the organization until 2016 as a member or chair of committees, including nominating, intellectual property rights, conference planning, and seed and grain. Additionally, Mr. Gray received the Purdue University Distinguished Agriculture Alumni Award in 2013. Zero, thank you again for being with us today. Our final panelist is Stephen L. Miller, Illinois 64. Stephen L. Miller graduated from the University of Illinois with a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering in 1967. Mr. Miller is the chairman and president of SLM Discovery Ventures Incorporated, a company formed in 2002 pursuing commercial ventures in support of volunteerism, social outreach, and higher academic achievement. These efforts focus on enabling sustainable transformation in not-for-profit organizations. Mr. Miller is also the retired chairman, president, and CEO of Shell Oil Company from 1999 to 2002, and the retired managing director of the Royal Dutch Shell Group, 1996 to 1999. Active in both the business and not-for-profit communities, Mr. Miller serves or has served on the board of several local and national organizations. In business, he is the past chairman of Gen On, Reliant Energy, and a former director of Applied Materials. In the not-for-profit world, he is currently a life director of the University of Illinois Foundation, and the chairman of the Board of Advisors of Rice University's James A. Baker III Institute for Public Policy. He is the past chairman of the University of Illinois Foundation, the Points of Light Foundation, the United Way of Greater Houston, the Center for Houston's Future, and the Greater Houston Community Foundation. He is the past vice chairman of the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. He also is a emeritus trustee of Rice University. Mr. Miller has received numerous recognitions both in the US and abroad, including the University of Illinois Alumni Achievement Award, the University of Illinois William Winter Award at Champaign-Urbana, the Points of Light Award, Triangle Fraternity's Hall of Fame, the Fast Company Magazine's Agenda Award for Grassroots Leadership. Mr. Miller and his wife have also graciously endowed the Stephen L. Miller President's Academy. Married with 2 children and 4 grandchildren, Mr. Miller has served as an elder in 3 Presbyterian churches. He also has interests in American history, antiques, golf, and is an honorary member of the Houston Golf Association. Stephen, thank you again for being with us today. Gentlemen, again, thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us and taking some time out to just chat through some questions and also answer them from our guest attending today. Is there anything I missed in our bios that you guys want to put out there?
I think you covered it very well, Carrie.
Okay, all right, thank you. I practiced that a few times, guys.
Very comprehensive, good job.
We're going to shift into our question portion. So again, our attendees joining us today, feel free to pop this in the Q&A area and we'll get to them as we conclude out kind of our scripted questions here. So after going through our introductions, it's clear that you all have great success, great insight in your specific professional areas. Can you all please elaborate on what top traits you believe are critical for being successful in your roles today or other roles that you may have held previously? Matt, you want to get us started? Okay.
I certainly can, though I'm eager to hear the other 2 gentlemen's answers as well, because I'm sure they'll be very good. There's many things, there's many traits that are required to be successful in leadership, in business and career leadership, and other aspects of leadership as well, right? When I first thought of this question, 4 things that came to mind for me, 4 traits. One is confidence. The ability to speak clearly, to have confidence and knowledge about what you're doing and the decisions you're making as a leader. Another is creativity, the ability to absorb information and come up with creative solutions to whatever problems you're facing, particularly in the crazy world that we live in this year. It seems, no matter what industry you're in, the challenges are significant. Caring is another one, which I think is particularly emphasized in today's world as well. But in any leadership role, caring about the mission of your business, but also the people that work for you that are part of your organization, and being able to build caring connections with them to lead the organization are very important. And I think a desire to learn is really important as well. All of us in Triangle come from learning backgrounds with the careers that we've chosen and the educational paths we've chosen, but the reality is the learning you get in college is just a tiny fraction of what you need to be successful in your career. So a willingness and desire to learn about many new areas as you continue in your career path is very, very important.
Thank you.
I like Matt's list. Couple that I might add on top of it. I agree. First, it takes a lot of skills and you're not going to have all of them. One thing I've found is the leadership executive team that you surround yourself with. You really got to be honest with yourself on what your strengths and your weaknesses are, figure out how to adjust and manage those things, learn how to try to improve on those things as you go. But I think an ownership mentality, your willingness to put everything on your shoulders, sleep not so good at night at times, and carry people across the finish line if that's what's needed to do sometimes is super important. And back kind of extending on Matt's comment, that connection with people, building trust and a culture is tremendously important as an attribute.
Okay, Carrie, you want a couple of comments?
Yeah.
Great lists and great guidance from my colleague brothers there. I'll tell you how I approach this is I think the question at one point, Carrie, was framed in the words around senior, but I began to think that really success is not just at senior levels, but at any level. And I had a list of quite a few attributes that I liked, but then I said, what if could you boil it down to one word? And for me, that word is ethics. That is the most important thing you bring to the table, ethics and credibility. And that's the relationship side that was being talked about by Daryl. But no matter what happens in terms of success, you can have success in the short term being unethical, but success in the longer term is all about ethics, and it's all about credibility. And you might even say it's all about character. That to me finally is the cornerstone of what determines success. So if you can do that well, you are successful no matter what level or position you have in life.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. And I think all of that really goes back to that insight is helpful for our students who are searching for their internships and finding success in those internships, all the way to our established alumni who are running their own businesses as well and taking that information no matter what phase of life you may be in. My next question is timely, especially for any seniors that we may have on the call or juniors who are in that internship phase of looking. And that's, as an individual in an executive level role, how are you or will you be viewing new graduates or potential interns who have fewer hands-on experience due to some of the restrictions in place from COVID-19?
Who would you like to have take that one?
Stephen, you want to take that first?
Okay, I think that poses a hurdle that I don't think exists. I think the most important thing, when a person is looking at bringing in an intern or a first-time employee, you're recognizing that coming from the schools and the background that somebody from Triangle would have, therefore their age and experience are going to be competent. What you're looking for are those very special skill sets which could be honed and developed. And you're looking for the opportunity to develop that person in your company. The starting role is not so important. And so if you're thinking about how you go forward and there aren't a whole lot of internships, find ways to get connected to an organization, even volunteering, because that's noticed. That's one of the kind of leadership traits that shows up. I always used to talk about it as the informal leaders of an organization, but as a person hiring an intern or a first-time person, I'm really looking for, do they have something special that I could help develop and mold and over time can develop and bloom? So it's not to me so much a problem of someone else has maybe had a little more experience last year and you couldn't do it during the pandemic. That's not the way I look at the people.
Zerald, do you have anything to add? I saw you shaking your head.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think it changes much. It'll change, where you got your experiences, but I just want to see experiences. Funny thing, I probably refer back to my days detasseling seed corn more often than a lot of other experiences in my life. It's what did you learn? What failures did you have, and what real responsibilities did you have, and what experiences came from that. Punting because of COVID, that's not going to go over so well. But no, I'm more interested in what did you learn than was it internship at a big 4 car company. So.
Thank you for bringing back memories of detasseling. That's great. Haven't thought about that in a while, but fond memories of a couple years of that myself as well. I can completely agree with both of your answers as well. And Carrie, when you had shared this question, my reaction also was, I'm not sure if it, yeah, I think everybody's going to be in the same place kind of in these current classes. When I'm looking at hiring somebody who's early career, whether it's fresh out of college or in those first couple of years, honestly, I'm evaluating you more on what I think your potential is and not on what you've actually done so far. And so those, you need to have experiences. Stephen mentioned volunteering, other types of things, anything you can do to show more about your core character and your traits. And, honestly, key things I look at are work ethic. Is this someone who does the bare minimum, or is this someone who goes above and beyond? Is this someone who has an ownership mentality, to use your phrase from earlier, which was fantastic too? So anything you can do to demonstrate that, whether it's volunteering or involvement in a family business or family activities or other things, like it doesn't have to be a professional internship in your exact career path. I also look heavily at your communication skills, just how you handle the communication process of speaking to us about an opportunity, about following up with us, about interviewing, your professionalism, your reliability around all of that. Again, looking more for potential than the actual list of things of historical achievements on your resume, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think anyone that's on the call that's finding themselves in that position may have just taken like a sigh and feel a little bit better about the process, because all of our Triangle members have those experiences, have skills that they can talk to, even if it's not an in-person experience. They have that skill set that y'all were mentioning. So we're going to shift, and I'm hoping that this will have you guys reminiscing fondly on your undergraduate experience as a Triangle. So what do you believe to be the single greatest thing that you took away from your time as an undergraduate brother of Triangle?
I think I'm up. Yeah, so you know how your parents always told you it mattered who you surrounded yourself with, your friends? That is so immensely true, and it can't be overstated enough. I think the fact that I was involved at Triangle at that point in time in my life when I was going from childhood to adulthood, and the people I surrounded myself with in that process was super critical to the path and the journey I took. At that time, there was a lot of very smart leaders and people who really pushed me to reach a little bit beyond myself and my expectations and core competencies, and started developing some habits in life that were really core to my success afterwards. So it matters who you surround yourself with.
Stephen?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and since this is being videoed and can be showed later, I thought I'd need to get a couple of things on the table first. One is I thought about this question in three ways. The first off, which we need to get on the table, is that my wife and I met each other building a homecoming float between Triangle and Kappa Delta, and we've been married 53 years. So if I didn't get that on the table as being the lead experience, you wouldn't be able to have me as a panelist next year, probably. So that is a long-term, life-forming thing that occurred, and it's one of the big takeaways. The second one, and I won't even repeat, just other than to say Daryl's right on about who you surround yourself with. The brothers that you had at the house, they did all the things Daryl talked about. And I've got a couple of them that I am still in contact with. Fortunately, we have still survived and communicate regularly. And so Daryl's component for me is also right in there. And you can't kind of choose between, is it that or is it meeting your future wife? But the area that is, if you pose it in the context of what framed or brought about the opportunities career-wise, it was about the leadership positions that I was able to do at the Illinois chapter. I didn't realize it then, but you're learning really life skills about how to manage and how to lead. And you're doing it in a relatively safe environment. So, you know, if you mess up, you can learn from it without having a drastic situation. And I remember teaching one course about what you learn in leadership at the undergrad level. And I took the example of a real case we had at Illinois when I was a junior, and had the team work through it, and then showed them that it was the same process and the same issue about ethics and the same question on a very large major international deal 25 years later. So the opportunity within Triangle to experience new things, to be able to learn leadership skills early on and practice them, what you find is when you get on different playing fields, you've kind of run the play. And it may have more consequences, more on the table, more people, but it still gets down to the same core decisions, just as you were doing when you were leading and engaged in your fraternity. So did I cover all the bases there? So when Sheila calls.
Right, we'll clip that just for her.
Thank you.
I completely 110% agree with both of those prior answers. Excellent answers. Yeah, and I also interpreted the question to think about from a career standpoint, but can relate on the experience as well, the learning experiences in the fraternity, and also meeting your wife as a result of that experience. I have that same experience as well, meeting my wife in my case. But I would say, to tie back to one of my earlier answers too, one of the biggest things I took away from my experience as an undergraduate in Triangle was confidence, one of those key traits for future career success as well. You know, I came into college and was a kind of a introverted, nerdy, quiet guy, and I'm still an introvert today, but certainly the experience of being the leadership opportunities you get thrown into with Triangle, the friendship that you get from your fellow brothers, the exposure, the learning opportunities, all those things, you know, and when I reflect back now a couple decades later and think about how much my confidence grew as a leader in leading others and being part of a team, following other leaders too, both of those things just grew immensely during my Triangle and my college experience. So that's had one of the greatest impacts on my life personally.
Awesome. Thank you guys. I think a sneak peek into your guys' collegiate experience probably is reflected in a lot of members' experiences, no matter if they're undergraduate members now or, you know, have been alumni for decades. Our next thing, we're going to shift a little bit, but stay kind of in that college mindset and having the knowledge you do now from your many years of professional experience and success. What is that one piece of advice that you would give to our undergraduate students or even young alumni who are just striving for success in the workplace and in the work that they do? Matt, do you want to kick us off with this one?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. My answer on that would be, I think there's, as the prior question alluded to, there's so many great things you get out of the Triangle experience that really are foundational for the rest of your career. I do think something that is some advice I would give to undergraduates is to also try to actively seek out a diversity of experiences from a leadership and exposure standpoint in your career as well. You know, Triangle is a fantastic organization because it, you know, for myself, I don't know that I would have been a typical fraternity person, but drawn in through, you know, the promise of something that was for architects and engineers and scientists. That's what drew me in personally. And I think it just offers tremendous benefits for people that are drawn to those sorts of careers, right? At the same time, it does tend to draw a lot of personalities that are oftentimes not the same, but similar. Like there's certain personalities that go into those types of fields. And as you advance in your career in business, if that's your goal, then it's helpful to understand there are a lot of other personality types out there. You know, not to stereotype, but working with folks in other types of career paths can sometimes be very different than the large number of engineers that I live with in our fraternity house in college. And I think there was some learning on my end post-college to learn how to deal. Oh, not everybody thinks like an architect or an engineer. And I think one piece of advice I would give to undergraduates in the fraternity today is absolutely make the most of your experience in Triangle with those friendships and the leadership opportunities, but also engage in other things in college too. Get involved in a couple other campus organizations, make sure you're getting exposure to a diversity of personalities, because if you want to serve in a executive or leadership role over the course of your career, understanding how to work with other mindsets and personality types will be equally valuable to you, in my opinion.
Stephen, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of interesting because it gets to the point about what is the initial step in your undergraduate career and your affiliation with Triangle. I mean, the most important thing that you have coming out of college, basically, from a career standpoint, is you got to really do well in your chosen discipline. If you don't do that, you never really have a chance to start. But the interesting thing is that doing well in the discipline, and that gives you the kind of the kickoff into the career, that as you become more senior and have greater responsibilities, the skill set changes completely away. It's not about, what you learned as an engineer or an architect or a scientist. It's now about all the soft skills, which is the relationship issues that Matthew was talking about. Those then become paramount. The knowledge background is there. You can learn some of that as you go forward, but as you become more and more senior, you basically are entering a world where success is measured not by what you learned in your undergraduate or graduate years, but what you learned on the side. And I hate to say it that way, but that's what the opportunity at Triangle is. It is a way to develop that other side and early exposure. You're not going to become perfect in that, but it'll plant the seeds, which if you're successful and continue to apply yourself, you will have the opportunity to use. And so it's kind of an inversion as you go from being very competent in your studies, which you have to do. You got to knock them dead. Those first few jobs you get, you got to knock them dead, because without that, you never get a chance to do the other stuff. But as the other stuff takes place, the emphasis becomes more and more on those soft skills. And that's what Triangle gives you the opportunity to learn to do in a very safe environment.
Thank you.
Agree. Build EQ skills, build EQ skills, build EQ skills. Super important. Take risk, make affordable mistakes. Push yourself. You have no idea what you're really capable of until you put yourself in that position. I think my most successful semester, I took 21 hours and TA'd 2 classes. It's amazing what you can do if you apply yourself. But there's a concept that I've tried to get across to people. It's everything that Matt and Stephen just said in a different context, but all these young men that are on the phone, undergraduates, have spent their entire school career so far as investors. Mom, dad's money, but they've been investing their whole life, their time, their energy, their talents, right? And not just in college, but beyond, you have to maintain that same mentality. You can't stop investing. You cannot stop being a learner. You can't stop working a 40-hour work week. You have to have the mentality of investing in yourself with time and energy, and the money will come, and then you start thinking about investing in different ways. But I'm often in that discussion with people about what are you doing to invest in yourself, and you're investors now. You just need to continue that process in your life.
Thank you, guys. My next question might be a little bit easy for you, or maybe it had you stumped a little bit, but I'm interested to see what you guys have to say. If you could go back to your undergraduate years in Triangle and do it all over again, what is one thing that you would do differently? Stephen, you want to start us off?
Sure. And I don't, I thought it was an interesting question. And I don't want anyone to, this is not a flip answer to it. But if I had to go back to my undergraduate years and Triangle, what would I do differently? Well, I would have really loved to have had time to play on the Illinois golf team. And that's, again, part of the relational things that you get to do. I kind of had the requirement from my parents and what I could earn to get out in 4 years. At that time, you had to have 144 hours to graduate. So that's a heavy schedule. That's 18 hours a semester. I was lucky enough to have some great opportunities within the fraternity and was developing the leadership issue. But all those labs as an engineer doesn't leave you much time to go out and hit golf balls and put putts in the hole. So if I had any change, I would have loved to have had another year or year and a half that I could spread it out. But it would have been a very different aspect, and not to say that I would ever go on the tour as a pro. Fortunately, that's a great hobby of mine, but that's not how I would earn a living. But it would have been one of the great things. But that, again, is a relationship thing, because I feel that other than that, all the other experiences I had, I wouldn't trade them for anything. And they were a great part of what I've done in the 50 years since. So I really wouldn't change that, other than that opportunity to go play for and have that golf ball go in for the Illini.
Awesome. Thank you. Matt, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I would, if I could talk to, myself 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and give some advice on it, I would maybe echo some of the earlier comments that were made here about viewing your experience in college and Triangle in particular as a learning lab. And that, not every single thing has to be 100% successful in that. Sometimes you're going to fail and learn as much or more from those failures as you are from the successes. I think, like many of us, in college, everything was really, really important, right? And really serious. And there were, in the course of running a fraternity and being part of the leadership of it, there was a million challenges that came up and things that were so stressful at the time, right? It seemed like the whole world revolved around some particular issue that might seem not that significant now, a few decades later. And recognizing that, yeah, it's a learning lab, I think, is a good way to say it. You're going to learn so much from the experience, whether it's succeed or fail, but maybe sometimes be okay if it doesn't turn out the way that you want, or don't take things so seriously, because regardless, you're getting tremendous learning from it.
Yeah, thank you. I think Stephen put it really well earlier, and he said the fraternity is a really safe place
Yes.
to learn those successes and to also learn the failures. And I like how he put that.
That's a great way to say it. I agree.
Carpe diem. I was a complete train wreck my freshman year. Lots of learned experiences. So I wouldn't have wasted my freshman year as much, for sure. I'd spent a lot more time developing more and deeper relationships. I had 2 mentors that were professors, and I would have spent more time even building more and more deeper relationships with the faculty. That turned out to be very valuable to me throughout my post-academic career.
Awesome. All right.
Carrie, maybe let me give one example about a safe learning experience, which becomes a life learning experience. My senior year, when I was president of the fraternity in the spring, there was always, fraternities would build water balloon launchers. And as engineers and scientists, Triangle, Illinois, we had the best water balloon launchers anywhere. We could hit fraternities 2 blocks away. They couldn't hit us. We were having a great time. And then I got a call from the dean of students, who didn't think the water balloon launching was so great. But I can tell you that going down and talking to the dean, which is a very memorable experience, was the place in a safe context that you could learn about accountability and what it takes to be a leader of any group, whether it's a senior level, mid-level, or whatever. And so it's a great example to me of the safe learning environment, which, I could graduate, but I can tell you that always carried along with me. And about 40 years later, when I had returned from Europe, I was going to the University of Illinois and was going to see the president. And I was ushered into the very same waiting room that I had been in 1967 before my discussion with the dean. And outlined there, they had Danish and coffee and whatnot. And the PA asked me, "Have you ever been here before?" And I said, "Yes, but I don't remember the coffee and the Danish." But just an example of real learning goes through your life. You never forget what it means to be accountable for your people, whether it's stakeholders, shareholders, employees, whatever. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to shift to the impact that Triangle has had on you as a leader of your company or organization. So specifically, how has Triangle made an impact on the way that you have led or previously led? Zero, you want to kick us off with this one?
Sure. I think, the difficulty of leading in a fraternity is your peers, right? You're all roughly the same age. Maybe 1 year makes a big difference, or a couple of years make a big difference in college, but you're all roughly the same age. You're going through the same similar kind of growth and experiences. But the one thing I learned what worked for me in leadership in the fraternity was by example. And when I got out of college and I went back to a family business where, the young kid, the family, run organization, kids come back from college, no one really wants to listen to him much. And what I found worked well was, never asking anybody to do something I wouldn't be willing to do, leading by example. And it got to the point where literally every new employee that would come on, I would always make it a point that person would work with me their first week at the job. And I would make sure that I did every horrible task that needed to be done that week. And that person would be there by my side, not doing it, but handing me a tool if I needed it, being present, watching me do it, and knowing that I was never going to ask them to do anything that I wouldn't be willing to do myself. So that was one thing I definitely took from leadership at Triangle.
Thank you. Stephen?
I think that point is right on. I mean, it's and that's in a leadership role, you I think only slowly come to understand that, people are observing you all the time. And it isn't what you say, but it's what you do. And so Daryl's example of showing you that I do that tough job, I'll do it. That is more important than any kind of speech or anything else you can do. I remember I used to annually have a theme for the coming year, and I used to use a comic strip from Hagar the Horrible. I don't know if any of you may remember it, but each year on my annual address, I would kick off with the Hagar cartoon. And that became the theme for the year. People didn't remember, probably before they got out of their chairs at the end of what I had to say, but they remembered the cartoon. And so they remember the storyline and they remember the actions, which also says that as a leader, you have the responsibility not just to say the words, but you got to really live the values. And that's one of the great takeaways with Triangle, is living the values of the fraternity. It instills in you a discipline and an understanding of a diverse set of circumstances, which you take with you throughout your life.
Thank you.
I completely agree with those answers. In my answer, I was going to talk a little bit about values as well. I think that's an incredibly important thing. Triangle does such a great job at having core values, but articulating them throughout your experience as an undergraduate member. I honestly probably took it a little for granted and coming out of college and entering the real world and being like, oh, doesn't every business have a set of core values? And how come we don't talk about them all the time? I thought that's what organizations do. And of course, the real world is much more complicated than that. When you get into business, every organization that exists has values. They may or may not be documented. They may or may not be articulated. And what's actually lived may not be the same as what's written down. It varies, right? But learning that and understanding what they are and learning to reflect them and live by them, or when appropriate, to have influence on them. Or as an entrepreneur myself, as I went from working for others to then starting my own businesses, understanding the importance of values and defining them. And different organizations have different values. They're not all the same, but just the importance of focusing on that, on talking about it, on developing with your team, on writing it, articulating it, speaking it, but then living it in the day-to-day too. Yeah, definitely a core learning from my Triangle experience.
Thank you. We're going to do one or two more questions before we shift over to our Q&A. My next question is about this digital era that we're living in and more people working remotely and that being an option. So can you tell us a little bit about how that is making an impact in the workplace and how you're leading a team that may be working in those remote type of capacities? Zero, do you want to start with this one?
Sure. I think we are using a lot of these tools before COVID. I think we're getting much better at using these tools and there's going to be some efficiency that's going to come out of this in long term. When I've discussed this topic with other executives and all different fields all over the world, there is kind of a general consensus though, and it's very industry dependent and everything else, but there's a difference between maintaining your business and growing your business. And it's just going to be very hard for most businesses to grow in a digital environment, because it still comes back to creating connections, creating trust with people. And that gets back to making connections face to face. So I think there's efficiency, a lot to learn. The tool's going to be used well, but I truly believe we're going to have to get back out and continue to engage face to face.
Thank you. Stephen, anything on this?
No, I completely agree. I mean, it's at the end of the day, particularly in leadership positions, it is about people. You can go so far with the Zooms and that, and the better you know people, the longer you can do that, because you learn and from the individual, when they lean back in their chair, he's really not paying attention to you. Or, if they're looking off and, to the left or right, they're disengaged. So if you know people really well, you can probably extend this tool a little farther. But at the end of the day, it is about relationships. And I can always remember the toughest issues that had to be resolved, you always did in person. And because there is a give and take that goes on there. And that's where the issue about ethics and character and transparency becomes so important, because I need to know who I'm dealing with before I'm going to be willing to cut a deal or whatever it happens to be. If I only see you over the screen, I can only go so far on that. So I think the pendulum will come back. It'll be part of the toolkit. You probably will never get as many conventions as you used to have. You won't have to do as many business trips, but there's going to be a minimum requirement, depending on the industry, about the in-person things that you're going to have to get back to doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can add some comments on this from my perspective as well. I completely agree. I mean, there's no substitute for like face-to-face, real physical connection. There's always going to be incredible value in that. The world is changing though, and I'm real curious to see how it evolves over the next couple of years once the immediate concerns over the pandemic subside, hopefully. But and it certainly will vary some by industry. But I can speak to the industries that I'm involved with or have a history in, and they're changing very considerably. So in my career, I've started 4 businesses that were like actually had employees or teams of people working on them, and some other ventures that did not, but 4 actual real businesses with people. My very first one was a construction software company. That's how I fell into software from being an architect. And that business was completely grounded in a physical office. Like the importance of culture and having people in the same space was so incredibly important. We were acquired by a bigger company that had a physical office in a different city and had lots of worked hard, but had lots of challenges over time trying to figure out how you get a couple cultures that are used to being together physically to work together over a distance. Like there's painful challenges that any multi-city, multi-location business have to deal with. One of my next businesses after that, which is one of the ones I have still today, Charette Venture Group, where we work with architecture firms across the country to help them grow. I actually hired a gentleman who's the CEO of that business today, and this was 6 years ago. And he persuaded me at the time that we should go completely virtual with that business, which was not my experience. But that we should have teams, that we should find the best people to work on it, no matter where they're at. And we didn't need an office, that we could do everything through Zoom meetings and email. And yeah, travel sometimes to get face to face, but really be a 90-95% virtual business. That felt super risky at the time and unusual. And now him and I joke and I say, gosh, you were so right. You were 5 years ahead of schedule on that. But it's amazing how prepared we were for this particular situation. But in that business, we've got a team of people that, yes, we do get together physically, or we did before the current situation. But 90-95% of the work is virtual. We work with 20 plus architecture firms across the country. We have very deep working relationships. We do all of that work virtual. And it's been very, very successful. And in that particular space, now with architecture and construction, obviously, if you're working on a local construction project, you still need to be able to physically go to it. But with the type of business work that we're doing to help these firms, you can build very deep, very effective relationships virtually. And even another business that I've started that you mentioned in my bio, Given, I've got 25 people working on a team for that, spread across the country. Small team, early stage startup, but we're doing that 100% virtual, and it feels natural. And I'd love to have a day when I can get that whole team together physically, because I'm certain we would get value from that. But it feels like we can be very successful with a very virtual format as well. The other thing that's been super nice is going back 2 years ago, when you were trying to meet with new people, half the time people didn't know how to join a Zoom meeting or what a Zoom meeting was. And now everybody can do it, right? Yes, regardless of age or technology sophistication or anything else that you would base it on, at least there's a comfort level with those tools, even if imperfect as well. But the world is changing, and particularly in the technology and software space. I think there's going to be a really profound change with the way offices are used and how organizations operate virtually in the future.
Thank you. And I'll conclude with one last question, and then we'll shift over to Q&A. I see that we've got some down there. So my last question for each of you is motivation. And I know it's not the easiest thing to stay consistent with, but can you tell us what keeps you motivated to be a leader in your organization or company? Stephen, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I think it comes down to the motivation for me is really being able to bring about very positive change in activities, organizations that I care about. That's what motivates me. And I think the application of the skill sets that I've learned over many years in different cultures around the world, that's what basically satisfies me. I love nothing better than seeing an organization that is struggling, that I think could do some real good. And if they were successful, could have a real impact. I get great satisfaction out of helping them be able to achieve that.
Thank you. Zero?
Yeah, I think a few years ago, I would have said, the next business, the next $1 billion in revenue, that kind of mentality, these hurdles, right? But then there was a critical moment in my career where I realized that I needed to start focusing on the success and development of other people instead of myself in the business. And I trusted that if I did that, everything else would take care of itself. And so that shift of mentoring, that shift to focus on other people's path and success was really the accelerating point in my career. And it felt super risky. I've been trying to mentor this next management team into that mentality, and it seems super risky to them as well. But that was a pivotal moment for me, and my enjoyment, my motivation, my long-term, ability to look back and feel good about what I've accomplished in my career is not going to be creating this company or the size or scale or the dollars. It's going to be looking at the success of the people that that we brought on, the talent that got developed, and where they went in their careers.
Thank you.
Great answers. I would say another thing for me personally is just being able to see impact, how you're helping others. And I like particularly earlier comments about those inside your company, incredibly valuable. Also those outside of it as well. So we're really gonna be able to see the impact on the stories from clients that we've helped, or in the case of my newest venture with nonprofits that we're helping, really seeing that and understanding the impact that you're making, the difference you're making, more than any particular revenue threshold or other things, which are very important in business. But it's really ultimately the impact on people's lives that is incredibly motivating.
Thank you, guys. So we're going to be shifting over to our Q&A portion of the event. And I just want to thank you all for answering those questions so authentically. And it goes without saying that the insight and experience that you all bring to the table is something that is beneficial to all of our attendees, from our collegians on the call to our most seasoned alumni. So we're going to open it up for questions. I'm going to read it off of the question board. If we have any attendees that haven't popped your question in, go ahead and throw it in there, and we'll try our best to make it through these. The first one I'm going to ask is from Joe Serrato. So he has a question for all of our panelists. And he said, all of you have made significant contributions to Triangle as an alumnus. Why is that important to you, and what message do you hope to pass along to our current and future alumni brothers? I can read it again if I need to.
Well, maybe I'll start with it, Carrie, if that's okay. I think it comes down almost as simply as why you give back. I think it is, as you look back, years past your graduation and your successes, you begin to get a better perspective of what was really important and fundamental to how you got to where you are today. Because none of us get to where we are without a lot of help along the way. And sometimes we don't appreciate where that help was coming from until we have enough years that we can see that perspective. And I think that's the driver in the motivation about giving back, to finding a way to do that. For me at Illinois, it was Sheila and my endowing the President's Academy, because as I mentioned, you get to really frame and learn a lot about leadership in Triangle. And we did that to be able to give to the presidents and other designated officers the opportunity. They've been selected by their peers to be leaders. So that's one of the big steps forward, is being recognized by your peers. But then to begin to give them the kind of learning materials that can kind of be the seeds for as they go forward in their life. That to me is a very gratifying to feel that I think we've had about 500 officers go through this course over the last decade or so. And that's the kind of thing that I feel really good about, is that these folks are going out, changing lives with their own practice. There isn't a set formula, because you take the learnings, build them into what you do, and then you create your own. And that for me is part of giving back. And that's the satisfaction to say there's something else other than myself for why I'm here.
Thank you. Sarah Lornette, would you like to provide comment to that?
Yeah. Time, talent, energy, specifically, and kind of touching back to what I was talking about on this mentoring mentality. Something, I've got guys that are 2, 3, 4 years out of college, and I'm trying to get them to start mentoring. I mean, they don't think that they're ready. They don't think that they have enough experience, and you start talking to them and getting to realize how much value they could have to somebody that's still in school or just a couple of years behind them, and the value of that. But what's really ironic is that no matter how much effort you put in, you get more out. Always. Mentoring, you will have to go through this process of self-reflection, and that process of thinking about and reflecting on what worked, what didn't, whatever, helping someone else is really comes back and pays you back many times over. So I hate to say it, you don't do it for selfish reasons, but I'm telling you, getting involved, putting that time and energy back, you always get more back than you put in, and encourage folks to get involved in mentoring back into Triangle.
Thank you.
Agreed and agreed. I would just add, gratitude, gratefulness. Triangle's made so many contributions to my life, and I think it, for any of us here as brothers can speak about it, the impact it's had on us. Being able to give that back to help others, whether they're other alumni or other undergraduates, or the undergraduates and alumni that are yet to come in future years and decades. Like, just that gratitude and that giving back is so incredibly important.
Thank you. We have a question from Tim Eiler, and Zerl, this kind of falls in line with what we were just chatting about mentors. He asked, how important are professional mentors, and how does one go about finding one?
It's usually as simple as asking. I don't know that I ever got turned down. It's very flattering to anyone to be asked to mentor, and just be reasonable with what your request is and the time and energy. Have lunch every once in a while. I probably always have a dozen or more folks that I do mentoring with at any one time, but in school, reach out to your faculty. I mean, these people can be incredibly valuable on a long-term basis. Look to that senior if you're a freshman. It doesn't have to be far-flung from where you are today. Your mentors will change over time. And like I said, even you think you're looking for a mentor, try being one to someone else.
Thank you. Stephen, I have a question particularly for you. This is coming from Keith, and he says, how did your experiences at Triangle prepare you for an international leadership role in a multinational enterprise?
That's a very good question. I wish I would have had it earlier to give some thought to it. I think actually it gets down to, Triangle is this organization, this fraternity of scientists, engineers, architects. It doesn't have the finance guys. It doesn't have the business guys. It doesn't have, in most cases, one of the collegiate athletes. Could have, but usually doesn't. And so what that did is in effect set the stage for being able to learn from others, because it wasn't there. You had this terrific community with Triangle, but then we talked about expanding the experiences, particularly on campus in the undergrad. And so it kind of drives you into that opportunity to interface and learn from these people. And of course, the reality is, if you're going to ultimately move to some levels of senior leadership, in most cases, it's not going to be all just about the technology. It'd be about all these other things. But I've always had an interest in geographies and international, and I did spend about 30% of my career overseas. So I have a lot of those international, and so you have to have a love of and embrace change and learning. I remember somebody telling me after I went to my second job in London, because I always used to talk in sports analogies, and of course they were American sports analogies. And I remember somebody telling me, he said, "Do you understand how many people all over the world are studying to learn about things like American football and baseball so they understand what you're talking about?" I mean, this is a push and pull, give and take type situation, but you got to be open to it. And that's if you're going to take the leadership chances, the leadership risks. That's all about exposing yourself, being vulnerable, not being afraid to fail. I failed miserably learning Dutch. My French teacher, but not my French teacher, she was French, but she was trying to teach me to speak Dutch well. I did okay with German, but I remember her walking out one day and saying, you are tougher to teach than the French themselves, this language of Holland. So, you have to be open to learning different things, and Triangle helps you do that. It's the early seeds.
Thank you. Zero, I have a question for you, and it's from Pete. He asked, what factors were involved in leaving the day-to-day operations of an established company and moving to a more startup or growing business?
Don't underestimate the value of ignorance. If I had any idea of the risks that I was taking at the time, I might have thought twice. But fortunately, I didn't ever stop investing, and I was in a position fairly young in life that I could take some pretty material risk and go do a startup with a friend. We believed in what we were doing. We were passionate about it. We were willing to put untold amount of energy into that concept and idea. And, I had the support of a relatively new and pregnant wife, and who supported me completely taking off, leaving the family business and doing something brand new. But it was with someone who I always wanted to work with. It was a concept we both had been talking about for years. And I knew that I would regret it the rest of my life if I didn't do it. And you have to own it. And that's why we talk about jumping off that mountain with the Acme rocket tied to our butt. And that's exactly what we did.
Thank you. This one's for anyone. And Tim asks, what's one key experience, exposure that got you to where you are currently in your professional career? What's one key experience or exposure that helped kind of propel you in your profession?
Well, Carrie, I might just say, I think I already touched on it. It's the point of learning accountability. It's the point of understanding that people do rely on you when you're in a leadership position. And that's the simple story of the balloon launchers. Where is it that the bell finally rings that in a leadership position you've got a different responsibility beyond just the task. You've got a responsibility to the people involved as you go up in the hierarchy. You have responsibilities to shareholders, stakeholders. There's a whole series of people, but it's learning and coming to grips with that accountability, that's what you have to have. And that then your fallback is the issue about ethics and character again. If you're true to that, if you're true to yourself, and you have to kind of work in a place, you do have to work in a place that shares your values. If you have different values than the place you work, it's not going to work. And you're better off to go on and find some place that does. But those are the things that that create the basis for dealing with the challenges.
Thank you. And our final question in here. Oh, Zero, you have something to add?
Yeah, two things.
Okay.
One, back to taking risks, affordable mistakes, but push yourself to take accountability, volunteer yourself to take on that task that seems just beyond your capability. You'll be shocked of what you can do if you're willing to be accountable for it. And anytime that you have to deliver something, your expectation, always deliver this much more than expected. You don't have to knock it out of the park every time, but you just consistently throughout your career need to provide more than what somebody expects, just this much. And if that's who you are and that's what you do, and those are the habits that you develop, you'll be successful.
Thank you. Our last question that we have from our attendees, and this is from Spencer. He says, the most interesting thing about Triangle to me is that we all study in very technical fields that don't explicitly teach us how to lead, yet we find ourselves leading nonetheless. What is an experience you have? What is an experience you have had that's taught you a keystone lesson in life and how you lead today?
I would say for me, great question, by the way. I'm sure if I reflected on it more, I'd have an even better answers. I think we all would, but just off the cuff, my Triangle experience, when I joined as an undergraduate, joined the Iowa State chapter of Triangle, the chapter was on the verge of collapse. It was struggling. And, now with some more perspective, I understand those things are cyclical. Chapters go up and down. That's normal. But at the time it was struggling. We were extremely low on membership. We were having financial difficulties. I mean, there was just a whole list of things that were wrong, which weren't disclosed to me during the recruiting process, but I found out after I joined. And it's nobody's fault, by the way, but it's like you're in a struggling situation where we had a small group of us that we had to figure out there was something we really believed in. Speaking of values, the core principles of Triangle and the potential that it could be on our particular campus, and going through a multi-year struggle with a group of really close friends and brothers to rebuild that, and to really turn the chapter successful again, to significantly grow our membership, to significantly improve our GPA, to get much more involved, and to deal with our financial struggles and the issues with our chapter house and all of that. Like that turnaround experience, and even the experience of going out and trying to recruit new members while you're selling not what you have today, but the vision for where you want to go as a chapter. Like that in hindsight, that sort of experience made me much more confident about taking on business challenges and starting new things, starting new business ventures in my career. But that first experience of having to deal with a chapter that was struggling and make it successful through the efforts of many, many contributors. That was a key foundational experience in hindsight that really set the stage for my career too.
Thank you. Matt, you talk a little bit about the unknown there, and Zeryl's pointed to it as well, taking a risk, and there's being some fear involved in that risk taking. We just got a new question that came in and said, how do you overcome that fear? And if you guys have any large professional fears that you've overcome, how did you go about that overcoming that fear that you may have?
Committing. Yeah, back to that ownership mentality and that being willing to take accountability, and then you kind of have to. And Lord knows how many times I've thrown myself into the have to category. It wouldn't have been anything I wanted to have done, but what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and it's a little bit at a time. But there is another concept, and you don't hear about it much, but back to this whole building EQ and connecting with people and building a culture and how to lead and everything else. I've found an enormous amount of strength in vulnerability, and it's a tool you have to be cautious with, But if you really want to create connections with people, you really want to create connections, dealing with that tough business, issue like you're talking about earlier, Stephen. It's knowing how to be open and showing some vulnerability with your business partners, with your staff. You can find great leadership skills that come from that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I completely agree, Daryl, that sometimes you just got to swallow hard. And if you think it's the right thing to do, you got to go do it, and recognize that it may or may not work out. And in most cases, if you trust your gut and you've got a track record of doing well with that, go with it. Get your people on side to do it. Give it a try. If it fails, you admit that it failed. But that's the issue of leadership, is that if it was all risk-free, they wouldn't need us. You wouldn't need the leadership. I remember teaching an MBA class, which was a test of application of theory about how Southwest Airlines built their business. And the case model had all the background information. And the question was, well, where should be the next step for Southwest? Nobody in the class got it right. And then you probed why. And what they did is they simply went back and did the historical analytical analysis, but came out with the wrong answer, because what they missed was the Kelleher inspiration for what would be different, what could create change, what might surprise my competitors. Because if you simply need a computer to do it, then I don't need you. But the inspiration is what you bring, and inspiration can only be done with an amount of risk taking, and only the leader can do it.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, guys, I think that we have gotten through all of the questions from our attendees. So we're going to start wrapping up the event. And I just want to thank everyone who tuned in today, especially those who were engaged in our Q&A portion and participated with that. We hope that we can continue to facilitate events and speaker series such as this to help meet the wide variety of needs that our members have across the country. Another big thank you and appreciation to Stephen, Daryl, and Matthew for spending the afternoon with us, and for all you do to support the mission of Triangle. So thank you guys again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie, for pulling it together.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your Sunday. For everyone else, we will record it is recording, so we'll pop it onto the platforms later, so that anyone else who wasn't able to watch today has the opportunity to do that at a later time. So thank you all so much, and have an enjoyable rest of your Sunday afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Daryl.
Bye, Stephen. Bye, Matthew. Bye, Carrie.
Bye.